Hi, everybody. This is Rosemary Coates in Silicon Valley. I'm your host for this edition of the Frictionless Supply Chain Podcast. I am the executive director of the Reshoring Institute, where we help companies bring back or expand their manufacturing in the US or rethink their global manufacturing strategy. I'm a contributing writer also to Supply Chain Management Review magazine. Today, I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Andrea Klein. She's the CEO of RAND Technology in Irvine, California. RAND is an electronics components reseller and global distributor. She's had a very, very successful and impressive history in the electronics industry, but I'm going to let her tell you about that. So let's get started. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Rosemary. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you started in electronics components. Those of us who are women in this kind of industry, it's a little unusual how we all got started. So tell us
Yes.
about your background.
Well, I actually I studied communications in college. This is many, many decades ago. And while I was going to school, I was working at night as a cocktail waitress. And I had some regular customers that after I graduated and I was looking for my job in public relations, whatever that meant, they said, "We think you would be really good in sales. We would love for you to come work for us." And they sold computer chips. And this is in 1980, and they didn't have a personal computer yet. And I had no idea what a computer chip was. But I thought I would take that on and do it during the day while I worked at night, while I was looking for my job in public relations. So I jumped in and I fell in love with technology because it was the future. And they were one of the first, at that time, they were called brokers in the industry. And I loved not only being in a forward-facing industry, but I loved the fact that the business was problem solving on behalf of the customers. So that's basically how I started in the industry. And this is in 1980.
Okay, so did you stay with the same company this whole time? Was that the original
I
RAND?
actually worked for two different companies, and I worked for two different companies. I became one of probably the top salesperson in the industry in the United States, because it was very regionalized at that time. And my experience and what drove me to start RAND was, I will never forget, there were two milestones that took place. So number one was early in my career when I was working for other people, I had an opportunity. I don't know how it happened, but I set up a meeting with the vice president of supply chain for Lucent Technology. And I flew out to New Jersey and I stood in front of him, and I was this young girl. And I will never forget that he said, "What is your value proposition?" This is 1980.
Wow.
I had no idea what a value proposition even was. I had never heard the phrase. I talked in circles for 15 minutes. I was absolutely mortified. And when I came home, I thought there was no internet then. So there was no way to look it up. So I had to call people, go to a library. I had to do all sorts of research to try to understand, what is a value proposition? I never wanted to not be able to answer that question again. And I realized that a value proposition meant, what can I contribute that would be of value to my customer? So I had the epiphany that I don't even really know what my customer needs or wants. So that became really important to me, that I needed to really understand my customers and what they needed and wanted and what was important to them. And so I began that journey, and to reach out to everyone I could and to listen and try to understand their needs. Then I started to create in my mind what was important now to them, which was information, right? Which was quality, which was safety. So I started to put together a formula based on my customers' needs, which I was consistently and ongoingly studying through every moment from then on in my career. Then I had the next experience, which was I had a customer call me, a very large global customer. In fact, it was Motorola in the early days, and they built everything. And somebody called me from Motorola, and the woman was crying, and she said, "We really need these parts, and if we don't get them, we're going to miss the quarter, and people are going to lose their jobs, not just me, but other people. This is going to really impact our company." And that really tugged at my heartstrings. And so I was determined to find a solution. And so I spent the next couple weekends studying everything I could and coming in on weekends to figure out, what was the part they needed? There's nothing available. Okay, what's the cost of their part? Nothing available. What's the upgrades of the cost of their part? Nothing available. I went through that whole process until finally I was able to find a solution. And they made the quarter and the jobs were saved. And so those two experiences taught me that it was really important to understand the customer. It was really important to be a study of that for the rest of my career. It was, and then it became personal and about people. So for me personally, it checked every box, right? I was in a significant industry that was changing the world. That was appealing. I was problem solving, which appealed to my intellect, but I was also helping people, which appealed to my heart.
Yeah,
And
I think,
so that's why I fell in love.
That's a very, very important lesson for all of us in business, whether it's supply chain or any other aspect of it, is understanding your customer and what they're looking for. And by customer, I mean not only external customers, but your internal customers. If you're
Correct.
supply chain, your customer may be in finance, or in production, or some other connection, and to focus on what it is they need, not what you're trying to accomplish, is
Exactly.
really change of perspective that's very important to being successful in business.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Those are great stories and a great lesson to be learned for sure.
Right.
So now you've been leading RAN technology for a long time. Tell us a little bit more about the company and what it is that you do.
Thank you, Rosemary. RAN technology, if I were to give you, I am going to say this, and I hope that your readers are part of supply chain, because if you're a neophyte, you may not understand this, so I'll try to simplify it. So RAN technology, I say, is a global sourcing and supply chain company that specializes in electronic components. We are in a category called global independent distribution companies. To say it to people in the supply chain, I will tell you that there are 4 sources of supply for hardware technology for components. Number 1, the OCM, the original component manufacturer. Number 2 is an authorized franchise distributors like Arrow and Avnet. Number 3 is global independent distribution companies. Think Arrow and Avnet, but independent, meaning that you don't have a line card that you're tethered to, so you can quote all commodities from all manufacturers from all points of the world at any given moment. And in that group of global independent distribution companies, there are only 7 or 8 of us in the world. And I, to this day, 30 plus years later, I'm the only 100% woman owned and certified by the US government. The 4th channel are regional brokers, and there are thousands and thousands of them all over the world, but they don't meet the very high bar and criteria of a global independent distribution company, which requires a global footprint. It requires financial wherewithal. It requires legal accountability. It requires certifications, high certifications, in-house testing, product warranties and guarantees.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. When you say it requires a global footprint, do you have offices in other places in the
Yes.
world?
I have offices. I have offices in 12 countries on 4 continents with sales, purchasing, engineering, testing, and logistics.
Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
what
you.
quite a company.
So to explain it to people, I provide a service. So I don't have a product, particularly parts. My job is to service you. So I don't, how you would use me is anyone building anything electronic, and I will just make up a name, Cisco. Cisco goes direct. That's where they buy their components. Cisco, if they can't get them direct, they might use a franchise distributor. But if there are no products, if they have an upside, if a part's gone obsolete, if they've just made a mistake, their contract manufacturer made a mistake, if something has happened that's disrupted their supply chain, where do they go? If I am a direct customer of Cisco, I might go to a franchise, but they're just another customer of the factory. And if the factory doesn't have them, they probably don't have them.
Mhm.
So where else can I go to solve that problem? I can't go to a regional broker because they don't meet the quality requirements and criteria. I go to RAN, right?
Okay.
Now, that's what the tier 1 customers do. Now, if Cisco also has surplus or excess inventory, they can't give it back to the factory. They won't take it. So what do they do to create sustainability and reutilize, right, surplus inventory? They give it to RAN. I am Cisco and I need to move something from one of my ODMs to another ODM who aren't friendly. I have RAN do that for me. So there are, if I need extra testing, right, or authentication, who do I go to? I would go to a RAN, right? So there are a lot of things that RAN does to service the supply chain on behalf of the tier 1s. Now, if I'm a tier 2 or a tier 3, I am a customer of the franchise. If I have a problem, I can't go direct because I am not a customer of the direct component manufacturer. Where do I go? Well, I could go to a regional broker, but I am going to be putting my quality at risk. So I go to a RAN to help solve my problems. So my job is to help balance your supply chain of whether you have too much or too little, and assist in services that you need from a neutral party.
Okay. So it's very striking the complexity of the supply chain in this regard.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that's typical of electronics in general. The supply chains are very complicated. This I would say the same thing about automotive is the requirements, the quality standards, the programming part of it, the distribution, all of that is considerably more
Yes.
complicated than it is in other industries. And that makes it, difficult to find the right supplier. So it's wonderful that you provide all these kind of services worldwide. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So in
Well,
your
it's
career,
32 years of problem solving. So whatever your problem is, we've seen it now.
yeah, I was just gonna say, in those 30 years, surely you've seen a lot of changes in the business environment. Can you talk a little bit about some of those changes you've seen over time and how they've affected your business?
Well, I think if you look at the last 30 years, the last 30-year cycle was really predicated on compute and mobile with a great disruptor called the internet. 2020 was the line of demarcation, and the next cycle will be about AI. If I look back over past cycles, I would say the 1990s were all about, the 1980s were all about the OEM. As the OEMs started to build out their portfolios, they couldn't keep building factories, right? It took too long, right? And so that was the 1990s was the advent of the contract manufacturer. So
Right.
they came in and said, I will build for you. You don't have to build a new factory. So, and we will be able to aggregate the spend, and we will lower your BOM cost and alleviate the need to build your own factory. So the 90s was all about CMs.
Well, I would
So
say the 90s was about the rise of Asia as well. So
not yet, not quite
not just
yet.
China,
Well,
but other places.
it
Yeah,
started, right?
like Singapore.
Motorola was a big person, one of the first to get over there. But I would say the 90s was about, um, um, it was for us, it was about the contract manufacturers, and they had many masters. So it was about what I did at my company is we were the first to be ISO certified. So it was all about quality. It was all about developing commodity management throughout my sourcing team. I put in engineering in place because we needed to create alternative solutions for our customers. So it was all about sourcing and quality and certifications in place in the 90s to support the contract manufacturer. The 1990s were all about, we had the run up with the internet, right? The dot-com run up.
Yeah.
And when the market blew up and the dot-com blew up is when everybody's revenue dropped 70% or something, all the OEMs. And all the OEMs had learned through that last decade of the 90s that there was hidden PPV and margin at the contract manufacturers. And so they came to the contract manufacturers when the dot-com blew up, and they said, we know you're hiding some money there and it's ours. And from here on in, we want an open kimono. And so the only thing that the contract manufacturers could do is everything got thrown over the fence to China. And so the real growth of China was in the decade of 2000 to 2010. And so that was all about utilizing, that's, how we changed at our company. That was taking all of the excess inventory, the billions and billions and billions of parts in the industry. After the dot-com blew up, I created a data matching software, and we were able to use our data matching software and the excess in the inventory, and we were able to create cost reductions on behalf of our customers, the CMs, because now they were looking for money under the money.
Okay. Yeah.
So that became about excess utilization, data matching, and cost reductions in the
Okay.
2000, 2010.
So in those
Then
cases, you were buying excess inventory.
Yes.
Okay, and then reselling it to the marketplace when they needed it. So that's sort of a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, it was a win. It was a win-win. It was, everybody was looking for margin, right? So then if we go from the decade of 2010 to 2020, 2010, we had a recession in the United States in 2008 and 2009. US went into a recession, then Europe followed. And basically what happened to the top tier OEMs, the global OEMs, was they lost their two highest margin regions, right?
Sure.
So if you're losing your margin, the only thing you can do is build out your revenue. So they ran into the emerging markets, the Brazils, the Indias, the Chinas, but they had to dramatically lower their costs in order to be able to sell into those lower cost markets. So somewhere around 2012, everybody woke up, every CEO, and said, we're not making any money, right? And so So every CEO in the technology industry started to downsize or probably psychologically devalue in their organizations the hardware group. So anything that wasn't outsourced became outsourced, and the focus
Yeah,
became SaaS, software as a solution, stickier solutions with more margin. Unfortunately, hardware started to look like a ball and chain and something that was eating up margin, but that's when the focus really became software. So now you start getting later in that 30-year cycle, and you can see that in any cycle towards the end, the margins go away anyway as
right.
industries become mature, and the focus now was software. So I think that one of the setups for this next market is going to make it so challenging is that for the last 10 years, which are the end of this cycle, this 30-year cycle, there is a lack of focus on hardware, and it's more about the software. And we have not been exciting the next generation in hardware technology. So, and then 2020 came, and you had your baby boomers retired. Your Gen X is a small generation. The millennials are just not interested in the heavy lifting, and Gen Z's too young, right, and inexperienced. So unfortunately, we wake up in what I consider a renaissance or a revolution in front of us of all new hardware technology, with a real shortage of expertise and talent. Now you add to that the global politics
Yeah, I was
that
just
are
going to say,
taking.
along with these kind of transitions over a long period of time and differences in the industry, now we've got the overlay of global politics in a way that we hadn't seen before.
Never,
And
never.
and that causes pause, I think, in most companies to rethink what they're doing and reassess the potential risk points along the supply chains worldwide. What are you seeing in terms of the geopolitics and how that's affecting your business?
I spent the majority of my career in a mindset of globalization. And I loved, I was a big believer in China and all that they could do. And I was, just a fan, and it was just exciting to watch. And I have a very diverse and global company. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now with the tariffs, the retaliation of tariffs, all this does is it creates chaos and adds cost. So we are already seeing the impacts of pricing going up. But I think that what we're seeing is it has a few impacts right now today. Number one is the driver of this market right now is the AI ecosystem. That's your hyperscalers, your servers, your storage, your power, your cooling, and your network, right? And so the data centers AI is the driver. There's nothing that's going to stop it. It is going to change the world. And that ecosystem is on steroids right now.
Yeah.
For the whole rest of the market, it is concerned about the economy, the global politics, right? And they're still flat. They're still buried in inventory, right? And they are sitting in the sidelines, and they are uncertain, because things are so unpredictable, right? And they're scared, right? You put big tariffs on Mexico, that could collapse the automotive industry, for
Yeah,
heaven's sakes, right?
right. And we've seen
So
so much movement. I know at the Reshoring Institute, we've helped a number of clients move from China into Mexico. And now the threat of tariffs in Mexico is making some of these companies rethink that strategy. And it's just, as you said, chaos.
yeah,
It's the trying to predict the unknown and the unstable approach in our government to what's happening there, and making it very difficult for businesses to operate in this environment.
I think that what people should, everybody's got their war room right now, right? If I'm not building it in Mexico, can I do it in Eastern Europe, right? If I don't do it in Eastern Europe, should I be doing it in Vietnam, right? All it's doing is changing the cost, moving the cost to a different area, right? That all being said, we can't bring it to the United States. Number one, you can't manufacture components yet in the United States. It
Right.
would take trillions of dollars and take 20, 30 years, right? You don't set up a foundry every day, right? But also, we don't have the talent here.
You're right.
So you can't bring it back to the United States and have immigration laws that don't allow anybody in, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't think we know where any of this is going to settle. But unfortunately, I think right now for the non-AI ecosystem, they're probably going to be very careful right now and even more conservative in
Well,
their forecasting, which means that the suppliers are going to continue to downsize and cut utilization because they're uncertain, right? So,
yeah, I think as you pointed out, there's so much uncertainty, and there's a lesson in here again.
yeah,
And I think that's for all supply chain people to learn to be very flexible and to understand that your supply chains are going to change. You need to have alternatives so that you don't get stuck single sourcing or in one region of the world. You need to broaden that supply chain so there are suppliers in other places to mitigate your risk, and learn to be constantly flexible. So
yeah,
rethinking, what are my alternatives? You
right,
go down
right.
one pathway, but also at the same time be developing a second or a third
Yeah.
option, because you may need that.
And I have to say something, and for all of you CPOs out there, if you are out there, I think you need to build in more buffer stock. So
Okay.
I know that everybody's been carrying a lot of inventory, but is it the right inventory, right? Because the only way to be absolutely certain right now you're going to get what you need is to be very aware of your vulnerabilities. Like you said, make sure you've
Yeah.
got alternate solutions, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
because if you
but
can't get your parts, you can't manufacture, right? And that's
yeah,
that's not going
and
to serve
I don't
anyone
know
well.
what will happen. I don't know what will happen because between China and Russia, they hold a lot of the mineral rights.
Right.
And we are right now seeing raw material issues that are impacting certain commodities in the
Right.
supply chain.
Yeah,
So,
Ukraine too. So, neon gas, for example, is an essential component in building semiconductors, and like 48% of the neon gas in the world comes from Ukraine, and that was some of those pipelines were stopped. During at the initial part of the war, or the factories were bombed. So yeah, it created a worldwide shortage in semiconductors. Being aware of these things, even what's going on with the trying to end the war in Ukraine now, those rare earth elements are in play. So the US is saying to Ukraine, sell them all to us, and there is no agreement yet. So yeah, it's very interesting to watch
yeah,
all the
yeah.
geopolitics and overlay that on supply chain. And I think there's no substitute from being informed and paying attention to what's happening in the environment. Well, Andrea, we're coming to the Andrea, sorry. We're coming to the end of the podcast here. And I'm wondering if you have some career advice for the women that are listening in, and the men, on just how to approach your career going forward. I know a lot of us stumbled into our careers and didn't do planning per se. We just went with the flow. But it's important to think about what that pathway should be. And what advice would you have for these people who are listening today?
I think that what I hear a lot from women is about this glass ceiling or this, that, and the other. I think a lot of that, it is still a male dominated industry.
Yeah.
But I think we only have ourselves to blame now for that because, my advice is this, be better. right? There's really no such thing as a company, if you're trying to sell to a company, if you can provide something valuable that saves time, money, or resources, right? People will listen. Now, if you're in a company and you want to get ahead, you have to be confident, be able to be clear and concise and with data about your contribution. And you just have to pull your shoulders back and demand what you want. Men do,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
great advice.
So I would also say that it probably would be helpful for women to be better mentors to other women. So women typically do not reach out to other women, they reach out to men. Women don't really get along as well in the workplace as we could. It's a little bit better now. It could get a lot better, right?
Yeah.
I also think that women in supply chain are phenomenal. It is very much in their DNA to be able to multi-source, to be able to work well on a team, right? To have better EQ, to be better communicators. So I think more women should encourage other women to get into supply chain because I find them to be exceptional.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Rosemary. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was so interesting to talk with you. Can you give us contact information if anyone wants to reach out to Rand or to you?
It would be www.randtech.com
Okay.
or Andrea Klein, Klein. So it's Andrea.Klein at randtech.com.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. And you can listen to more Frictionless Supply Chain podcasts posted on Supply Chain Management Review's landing page, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach me, Rosemary Coates, at rcoates, RCOATES, at reshoringinstitute.org, and visit our website, www.reshoringinstitute.org, where we publish all of our research on manufacturing in America. Thanks for listening today, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.